And welcome back into Midnight in the Desert. Twin Peaks week continues. And, tonight we're totally geeking out about Twin Peaks because not only do we have the opportunity to talk to Mark Frost, which was just huge. And I just want to commend Michelle again on the fantastic lineup of guests she has put together for this week. When I said, hey, let's do something crazy. Let's talk about Twin Peaks for an entire week. And she found a way to deliver in a way that will not only satisfy people who are fans of the show, but also just regular Midnight in the Desert listeners, regular members of the Midnight Society who will like some of the strange topics that were thematic elements of Twin Peaks, but that we can talk about here on the show just like we would any other. But tonight we're totally geeking out about Twin Peaks, and our next guest is going to help us continue to do that. Scott Ryan is publisher and author of several books, as well as the managing editor of the Twin Peaks magazine, the Blue Rose magazine, and he's also the host of the Red Room podcast, and he's going to be talking with us about how Twin Peaks shaped pop culture. Hello, Scott. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Hey, we are so happy to be able to sit here and do a real deep dive into the world of Twin Peaks. You're lucky enough to get to talk about this show all the time.
Well, I gotta say, when I watched the show originally as a college kid back in 1990, I never thought that Mark Frost would end up being the Don Rickles to my Frank Sinatra. So I feel really good about tonight.
Not only was that just perfect, but I love the references too. Although he was pretty kind for a Don Rickles.
But he was my opening act,
Right.
I mean. But, yeah, he's a great guy. I mean, I've been lucky to interview him, and, I mean, he's just a really, really smart guy.
I mean, one great thing about the world of Twin Peaks is that it seems like all of the people involved, they have a strong connection to the Twin Peaks community, to the fan base. They embrace that role, whereas, in other cases, in other cult-following shows, sometimes the actors and the writers and directors, they don't really necessarily want to embrace that. But it seems to have been something that's lasted for these 30 years.
Well, and I think that is why, honestly. I think it is because the actors knew this was special. And I think the fact that it lasted a short time, it only lasted 29 episodes, and then it was gone. And I think it mattered to them, and the fact that these fans kept it alive for all of this time, I think that matters to the actors and to Mark Frost and David Lynch.
So you mentioned that you were in college when this show came out, so you probably were a little bit wrapped up in some of the phenomena that it became amongst a certain part of the television viewing audience, but it wasn't this huge, overwhelming thing that the entire world was talking about. It was only kind of like the cool kids were watching it.
The cool kids and me is who were watching it. Yeah, and it's been interesting for me because obviously Twin Peaks grew fan base throughout the years. But I always consider me one of the originals because I really know how it went down. I mean, when Mark was just mentioning those preemptions in the second half of the second season, those preemptions were crushing me because you could just see the ratings dwindle. And I knew that something that was so special was going to be lost. And I know which episodes were preempted, when they were preempted, how long they were preempted for, because it mattered to me in a way that it can only matter when you're in college and something, all your friends are watching it and you're just totally wrapped up in the world while the rest of the world is watching Murder, She Wrote.
Oh, and in those days, too, networks would think nothing about skipping over an episode and saying, we'll just run that in the summer reruns.
Well, and that's where Twin Peaks ended. They pulled it, and the last two episodes were played as a 2-hour movie on a Monday in June in the summer. I mean, and the end of Twin Peaks, episode 29, is probably the greatest, cliffhanger of all time. I mean, what do you think of the last episode, the last episode of Twin Peaks? It blew your mind, right?
I mean, it did, but at the same time, I'm coming at it from a later era because I didn't see all of the original run episodes. So I think maybe the same thing happened with me where I was trying to watch it. I definitely did not want to watch war coverage as a sixth grader. so I might have flipped over to something else and not gone back. So I don't have recollection of that until watching it on Netflix. And then seeing it on Netflix, I said, well, we're almost to 25 years. They've got to bring it back, right? And then it just so happened that a couple of years later they made the announcement. So it wasn't as crushing for me as it might have been for you to see it at that time, but it is the epitome of a cliffhanger. I mean, I can only imagine what it was like to walk away from that and be. The only thing I can compare it to is I was a huge Quantum Leap fan growing up.
Oh, me too. Great show.
And seeing that final episode and having them say, and Dr. Sam Beckett never leaped home. What? What are you kidding me? I can't know that there's more out there that I'm never going to get to see.
Well, yeah, and let's get this show back. When you think of all the shows that have been rebooted, why are we not getting Quantum Leap back? So let's start on that.
Because of that damn NCIS New Orleans. People have to stop watching that show so that Scott Bakula can be available.
Well, let's just stop watching it because it's boring television that is all the same.
CBS crime procedurals,
It's not
more
for
initials. Yeah, we like the drama, the compelling drama, the weird characters. And is that what kind of drew you into Twin Peaks? Was it the fact that it was such a strange level of storytelling?
Well, I think it was just that I hadn't seen it before. And the story that I love to tell about it is I watched it at my girlfriend's house and with her parents. And about, I would say 6 minutes into it, a girl runs across the courtyard of the high school screaming. And you don't know why at that point. It has no context. And her dad just stood up and shook his hands at the television and said, "This is crap," and left the room. And I was riveted because I didn't know why, or I didn't know what was happening. And, I'm leaning in closer and closer, and then the mom leaves, and, the girlfriend is falling asleep, and I am like, this is what I've been waiting for.
It definitely feels so. The first episode, for anybody that hasn't seen it, you already know that it has this atmospheric feel, with the great theme and the way that they introduce everything. And so that when you're watching the show, it's going to be something that's an emotional step above what you're used to. But it also kind of started off as just being a murder mystery. You didn't really get the full level of the weird the first couple of minutes that you're watching it. So I think it did a good job of hooking in, Middle America for a little while.
Yeah, and the ratings back that up. The ratings for the pilot were a Super Bowl number. I mean, I don't know exactly what they were, but I would bet you that they beat J-Lo and his halftime show. Mm-hmm. They were huge. And then every episode after that was worse. I mean, it just drops and drops and drops because more and more of Middle America were shaking their hands at the television saying this is crap and walking out because it gets weirder and weirder. But also, as you had mentioned with Mark, it is grounded in real people. It's just strange situations.
Right. I mean, as weird as things may get, you can't help but feel the palpable grief, not only among, the Palmers themselves, but the entire town, because here's this, as far as they're concerned, this perfect young lady who is now just, with no explanation, with no sense to it at all, just gone, ripped from the world. And they have no idea about the underlying things that led to that, but still, like, you can feel the way that in a small town where kind of everybody knows everybody, that something like this will have such a profound effect.
Well, and this is a thing that I talk about and have written about a lot. You have a show like Bones or Law and Order or the CBS Alphabet Soup shows, and every week in the first 2 minutes, a girl is murdered, and she's dead in a dumpster. And then the detectives are making jokes in a few minutes. And when they interview the suspect, they might cry a little bit, but they're really going to go forth on the plot. The first 27 minutes of Twin Peaks is only grief. that's it. There's nothing else. And that grief lasts for episode after episode because murder, as Cooper says, really still matters in this town. They don't just kill a girl and then now enjoy your story. It's a grief that lasts all the way up through the very end of season 3. That grief is still echoing in that girl.
Right. I mean, and that's one of the things that I think is lost on a lot of people, that even when the mystery is solved, and even solved is kind of in air quotes to some degree because it just takes it down a whole different path, but it's still, there's no closure in any of it.
No, and you know, we're here to talk about how Twin Peaks changed pop culture, and to me, there isn't another show like Twin Peaks, so you can't compare it to something else. But what it did for television is it was really the first show that said, we're not going to answer that, and we're not going to wrap it up ever. Not this week, or not just, this season, like ever. We're never going to wrap it up, because in life, what is wrapped up? I mean, we still are wondering things. So that is what opened it up to television. And you had mentioned that X-Files is an important show for you. And that's what it did for the X-Files. It allowed Chris Carter to say, we're not going to answer it at the end of the episode. And that is what Twin Peaks brought to television.
Yeah, I don't think David Chase would have had the guts we'll use because we're on the radio. I don't think he would have had, the fortitude to end The Sopranos the way that he did if it wasn't for the fact that Twin Peaks was an open-ended mystery.
Well, or begin it the way he did. The Sopranos begins with the ducks in his swimming pool. And that really has nothing to do with anything. And that's a very David Lynch thing, a very Twin Peaks thing. And you're very interested in the ducks in the swimming pool. And that is not the main story. And those are the ways at Twin Peaks, it may not have changed network executives, but it changed young writers to say, I could tell a story and it could be my story in the way I view it.
I was talking with a coworker today because he thinks The Sopranos is the greatest show of all time. And so as we were talking about it, I said, there's a lot of Twin Peaks in The Sopranos. I mean, there's so much dream sequence, especially in the last season. There's, so many twists and turns of the storytelling, and the ambiguity as to, who you can trust and who you can't. There's a lot of that kind of bleeds through that, just like it did in other series. And you're right. You can tell how much of an influence it was on those writers.
Well, Martha Nachemson has a good book out right now. I think it's called Television Rewired, but I might have that title wrong. But she interviewed David Lynch and David Chase and David Simon. And who they say, who they lay it at is Twin Peaks. David Chase says, it was Twin Peaks that made me want to do this. I mean, he himself says that it was an influence. So it's a fact. Tell your friend, give it up. He's got to go back to Twin Peaks and pay homage.
But right away, we're dealing with the story of a young lady's murder, and it was already being handled unlike kind of any other way that people had ever done that before. It was almost a cinematic look at that grief. The same way that you would when you have 2.5 hours to tell a story, as opposed to having 1 hour of kind of hooking people in with that emotion. It was expert level the way that it was executed in order to make that pain and that grief resonate for the rest of the series.
Well, and David Lynch is not a filmmaker. He's an artist, and his palette is film. And that's the way, if you look at his stuff like that, then you can see it so simply. I mean, he's painting those scenes, and what he's painting with is grief. And you had mentioned Ray Wise, and like, it's insane. Ray Wise wasn't even nominated for an Emmy for Twin Peaks. That's ridiculous. His acting is incredible in the original series. And when I've interviewed him, I said, how can you do something that great? And he gives it all to David Lynch. He said it was David. He knew what to say. He knew how to put me in that mind frame. And he let me play, basically.
I think that you've never seen, and again, like you said, how much of this is David Lynch, how much of this is the actors, but you've never seen people play weird so straight. And
right.
and that's what I loved about some of those characters is they didn't know that they were strange.
Well, and have you ever gone to the grocery store? Because those people don't know they're strange either.
That's a good point.
And that's the thing. You can, people say all the time, oh, that's Lynchian. I mean, it really became a term. And it's basically because he put people on. I mean, people are strange. Me leading the pack. So that's the key to it. And other people try to force someone to be strange. But if you base it within the character and you understand why Leland Palmer is the way he is, or even the Log Lady who became a national character. Everyone knew the Log Lady back in the 90s. But when you find out she carries that log because her husband died in a fire, then it becomes something else. It's not strange. It becomes sad, and it becomes a way to hold on to grief again.
Yeah, I mean, really, you can't point to any character in Twin Peaks that won't resonate with people in some way. I mean, even the most straight-laced, and I guess you would call Sheriff Truman kind of like the most normal person in Twin Peaks. But even that doesn't really last because he's all in on some of the weird by the time everything's over.
Yeah, and to me, I love season 3. Some people have a problem with it, some people don't. But one of my things is you just really miss Michael Onkine. I wish so badly that he would have been in season 3, and I know it was the actor. They wanted him back. He just didn't want to come back. He retired and said, I'm done. But I think you missed the humanity of Sheriff Truman in season 3.
Yeah,
I should say I did.
No, 100%, because it was a humanity that I think kind of grounded everything else. And
and you could simplify it to he was Dr. Watson to Cooper being Sherlock Holmes. I mean, that's a simplification of what that relationship is. And Mark Frost talks a lot about, Sherlock Holmes is an important character to him and a lot of his other work outside of it. So there's definitely a flavor of that. And they mention it a lot in the Conversations with Mark Frost's book because it matters to him. But it's more than just Watson Holmes. It's a humanity versus someone who Cooper really looks at the bigger picture, almost another plane.
I mean, and as much as I loved Robert Forster as an actor, I thought he was every time that I saw him in a movie, I just knew that he would be one of my favorite characters. And he did a great job, and he brought a lot of that same humanity, but it wasn't the same having what was obviously a replacement character. Yeah,
and the thing that I said when I interviewed Sabrina Sutherland, who's the executive producer along with Mark and David in season 3, I said, how do you come back and not have that other person? It would sort of be like making The Way We Were, but you get Robert Redford, but you don't get Barbra Streisand in The Way We Were too. You got to have that couple. And to me, the couple of Twin Peaks is Sheriff Truman and Agent Cooper.
And really, Agent Cooper is kind of the and I always use this term, like when I talk about myself and what my job is in hosting a show like this, I consider myself the avatar for the audience. I want to be the one that is asking the questions that I think the audience would want to ask of the guests. And I think that Dale Cooper is a perfect avatar for the audience of Twin Peaks because he is asking all those questions because it's the nature of his job. And being an FBI agent is asking those questions and getting those explanations. So it's a great exposition storytelling device. But at the same time, like, you are 100% invested in this character from the beginning. I don't know anybody that watches Twin Peaks and says, yeah, I mean, I just don't like Coop all that much.
Yeah. Yeah, those people didn't, they left the show. But he does really have, it's got to be one of the greatest introductions to a character when he's driving into town and he has that long speech and, talks about the cherry pie and how much it costs and all of these things. Like, he's giving these details. And you got to remember, the show was written in the late 80s when the male detective was like the greatest god of television. I mean, you had Magnum PI and all of these manly men coming in, and in some ways Twin Peaks is taking a hatchet to this idea that, they're so smart and they're going to figure it out, and Cooper's throwing rocks at bottles to get his clues. So it's a really, really interesting character.
And you become so invested in that character that when the return comes around, it was almost like, I mean, obviously you have the ending of the second season, so you have that to be addressed. But at the same time, it's almost like we let Coop get away with not being involved in the weird so much so that, he was kind of the outside observer, but the driving force for a lot of it. And it was like with the return, they said, we're going to just put him through as many weird things as we can. And I think, the Dougie Jones portrayal is probably one of my favorite characters in all of Twin Peaks, because it's just, you watch it with this incredible, like, how long can they keep this going?
Well, yeah, and the thing about Dougie was, that's why I said when some people are angry with season 3 and some people aren't. I think people who accept Dougie for Dougie like it, and those who want to fight Dougie, you're not going to make it through season 3. This is just my feeling about what Mark Frost and David Lynch were trying to tell us when it comes to Dougie, because for those who maybe don't know, Agent Cooper is split into two sides, and that's pretty much what season 3 is about. There's a good one and a bad one, and Dougie is the good one. And his goodness rubs off on every person he interacts with. It just takes 16 episodes for you to get that. And
right.
It's teaching us that we should be kind to each other. And that is, to me, the true lesson of season 3. And it's one we really, really need to hear right now.
And we'll be taking a break in a couple of minutes, but we'll get into some of, the key moments of both Coop's original story and that later dichotomy, and how that kind of shaped the series and kind of both instances changed television. But it was almost like when they brought it back, they knew that they weren't going to be able to just answer the big question from the cliffhanger right away. Like, that would just be too easy to say, well, here's what happened next. Like, it had to be something that was one of the driving narrative forces of the return. But then they start bringing in all these characters that you think have nothing to do with anything. You're waiting for those nostalgic moments, but you're being introduced to all these new characters. I mean, Matthew Lillard is in it. And I never would have thought, like, Matthew Lillard would be in the world of Twin Peaks.
Well, and he's phenomenal. I mean, his scene is the best acting he's ever done. It's just incredible, the people that they brought on. And if you accept those scenes for these little gifts that David and Mark are giving us, it does all equal Twin Peaks. But I'm just curious, how did you feel about the X-Files reboots? Did you like it or not like it?
So the first one I thought had a couple of good episodes that, the werewolf one, it was just, that's a classic.
Darren Morgan. I mean, yeah.
Right. But then the last go round, I'll be honest with you, I have 3 or 4 episodes still in my DVR that I haven't even watched yet because I can't get my mind into that mindset of this is the X-Files. This might be the last of the X-Files.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, if you just bring it back and you try to do the same thing, you're not going to make it, I don't think. And Twin Peaks was never about that. So that's what they did in season 3. They don't touch on nostalgia, and they don't try to do the same thing at all. They don't even care what their cliffhangers were in season 2. They're like, we got a new story to tell you, and here it is. And I can explain how it all can work, but I will wait for that.
We will do that right after the break. We're going to be continuing our talk about Twin Peaks, how it changed pop culture forever, with our guest Scott Ryan. And we'll have some giveaways coming up a little bit later on, so stay tuned for that as well. Midnight in the Desert, back in a few. Welcome back into Midnight in the Desert. It is Twin Peaks week. We are talking with Scott Ryan. He is an expert on all things Twin Peaks. And a little bit later on in the discussion, we'll give away the Blue Rose magazine, which is the publication that Scott is the managing editor of. And we'll also be giving away some cherry pie and some damn fine Deadly Grounds coffee. That'll be coming your way a little bit later on. But tonight, I want to give you the second code word to write down, the second code phrase to write down to save up for Friday night's big giveaway for 2 free silver level package tickets to the Twin Peaks 30 official fan fest happening at Graceland, April 5th through the 7th. If you want to go to the home of Elvis Presley and celebrate all things Twin Peaks, we are going to have 2 tickets valued at $800 for you to win. What you have to do is write down this key phrase, hang on to it, and then on Friday night, we're going to ask you to send them all over to us. Tonight's key phrase, one chance out between two worlds. Again, that's one chance out between two worlds. And if you miss the phrase, you're just going to have to become a time traveler at midnightinthedesert.com so you can go back and listen to that and make sure that you write it down for your chance to win. I have to ask you, Scott, do you plan on attending the Twin Peaks 30 at Graceland?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, because I have breaking news for your listeners. I am allowed to tell you I've been in contact with the organizers at Graceland, and I will be involved in the event. We're teasing out what I may or may not be doing, but I will be attending and possibly be doing an event there. But they want me to announce that if you attend this event, you are going to get to do David Lynch's virtual reality for Twin Peaks that he has worked on. They're going to have it there, and attendees are going to get to try it out. So this is going to be a big thing that Lynch has been working on. It's something that kind of slipped out a couple months ago, where people thought season 4 was coming back, and I was like, come on, they can't do season 4 in a couple weeks. Like, it's going to take a while. But this is a really big deal that you're going to get to do the virtual reality, and they wanted me to announce it tonight on the show. So there's a little, they're going to formally announce it tomorrow.
Well, that's huge. Thank you for sharing that with us. So this is a virtual reality experience of actually being in Twin Peaks?
Yes. So you're going to get to move around the Red Room and other places, I'm assuming like the Double R Diner and the Great Northern, things like that. So you'll put on goggles and walk around in Twin Peaks. And it's something that Lynch himself has been a part of. And the first place you're going to get to do it is at this event. And I've been talking with them about getting to do something there, and it looks like it's going to happen. So, yes, I will be attending the event, and the Blue Rose magazine will be covering the event in a special issue and everything. So, yeah, I mean, it's a big deal for Twin Peaks nerds like me.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when we said they're bringing Twin Peaks to Graceland, I didn't know that they were literally bringing Twin Peaks to Graceland. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's exciting.
So, and if anybody gets lost, and if they get stuck in the Red Room forever, you signed a waiver when you tried it out.
You wouldn't. It'd just be 25 years. That's all.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's just a small price to pay.
Yeah.
And you get to talk backwards, so that's kind of cool too.
All the cream corn you can eat. It's fine.
And speaking of the Red Room and talking backwards and all of that, that's kind of, I think, for a lot of people where that's the touchstone point for Twin Peaks for a lot of people. That's where people either are hooked in and say, I'm all in for this, or where they might look at that and say, I'm out.
Yeah, and that was episode 2. And it ends with what people call Cooper's dream, which I think is interesting because I don't think it's a dream, but it's referred to as Cooper's dream, and he's in the Red Room. And it was in 1990 definitely the craziest thing that had ever been on television. I mean, did you see that one when you were in the 6th grade?
Yes, and that was the one that I didn't know what to talk about with it. Because first of all, anytime I've always had this little issue where anytime there's any kind of backwards anything, it freaks me out. And everything about that whole experience kind of freaked me out. But at the same time, I wanted to talk to everybody about it. And if I remember right, it was my friend Dave was the only other person that had seen it. And I remember saying to him, like, I don't know what to say. I don't, like, my TV reference at that point was like watching Alf and Cheers and Quantum Leap, you know, like I didn't know how to articulate the fact that I just seen something that was going to change the way that I looked at entertainment forever.
Well, and basically for anyone who hasn't seen it, it was something that came to David Lynch when he was walking out to his car. And he said he put his hands on the roof of his car and it was hot. And he just got this picture of a red curtains and the zigzaggedy floor and people talking backwards. And so he came up with this idea that the actors learn their lines backwards. They have to walk and move backwards, and they film it all in one take. And then they run the film backwards and everyone's talking forwards and moving forwards, but it's just wrong and it looks weird because they're not forming things right. And it is just a creepy effect that you don't know what to make of it.
Yeah. And it's one of those, it stays with you. If anybody that's seen it, it does not leave your psyche very quickly. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that, as you said, it was filmed in such a strange and weird way that it doesn't feel right. And you know that it's not right from the very beginning.
And this is the genius of David Lynch, because someone else could certainly say, look, just mumble your words and we'll dub it in. You can say it frontwards, but they actually have to learn their lines backwards. And I have been lucky enough to get to know Cheryl Lee, who plays Laura Palmer, and we've talked about it a lot. And she says that when you're acting in that room, you can't discount how hard it is for you as an actor, because you have to have your hand at a certain place and your inflection. And she said, you have to think the entire time you're doing it, but you're still performing and you're hitting these camera moments because the camera's going backwards as well. And a lot of times in these scenes, she has to kiss Kyle MacLachlan, and you've got to do it in such a certain way. And it's really trippy.
And just having the Man from Another Place there is one of the most iconic characters of television. I mean, that is the moment that you realize the Red Room aside and talking backwards, moving backwards, all of that aside, when you see Michael Anderson in there, you're like, okay, what the hell is going on here?
Well, and, Mike Myers ends up playing him on Saturday Night Live. So you want to talk about dipping into pop culture. Once Saturday Night Live is doing it, you've hit it.
Right. And it's just such a perfect. It's one of those you remember moments. There's not a lot of that's left in television anymore because of the way that people consume TV. You're not watching at the same time as everybody else. If there was texting or Twitter when this came out, like, it would have been blowing up with, WTF did I just watch?
Well, and that did happen when Part 8 aired over the summer of 2017. Part 8 is the most creative episode of season 3, and certainly probably since the 1990 episode where they did Cooper's Dream. What were your thoughts on part 8?
I would put that probably as, it's hard for me to say this because I think that Ozymandias, the second to last episode of Breaking Bad, is one of the most perfect episodes of television that I've ever seen. Like, I just love everything about that episode. But episode 8 of The Return is, even if you never watch a single moment of Twin Peaks, turn that on. Just watch that 1 hour. It's a David Lynch movie in short form that just tries to explain the meaning of life and the duality of life and the nature of good and evil, all in this one storytelling device. And it was just mind blowing as I watched it. And it's the only time I think in my life that I've ever watched an episode of television and then immediately watched it again right afterwards.
Yeah, because you wanted to figure out what the heck you just saw. And
I had no idea. I'm opening up my phone. I'm going on all the recap sites. And basically for that episode, I think I remember a lot of the recappers just looking at it, we don't know either. Like, we need to watch it a few more times ourselves.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was certainly... Well, I really like part 3 as well, when Cooper goes through what I call the purple room. That is very interesting too. But those two things in season 3, I just loved. And I remember how I was sitting, how I watched it, and my wife and I watched every part together. We didn't say one word for that whole hour. Like nothing. We just sat, and you were like mesmerized. It turns to black and white. There's no talking for like, I don't know, 28 of the 53 minutes. If you haven't seen it, you're right. You could really watch part 8, and you don't need any context because it has no context really to what's going on anyway. It's just this beautiful, mind-blowing piece of art.
It does have context, though, because in a way it explains everything, but it's up to you to work out the explanation. I mean, you're basically seeing, by watching this kind of the birth of Killer Bob, and you're watching how all of this kind of starts. And it's another one of those things that will stay with people. Can you listen to My Prayer by the Platters and not think of that? Can you... I used to have...
Look, I was afraid to come on a show called Midnight in the Desert because I wondered, wait a minute, is this a good idea? Because...
It's a great point.
If you start saying this is the water and this is the well, I'm out of here.
Well, I was going to say my text message sound for the longest time was, got a light.
Well, and I was lucky enough to have Robert Broski, who plays that guy, on the Red Room podcast. And I said... I hate to do it to them, but I was like, would you introduce the Red Room podcast and say, this is the what? This is the what? And he did. And so it's our intro that I rotate out, because he did the voice and everything. He's a great guy. I mean, he's very fascinating, but he's scary as all get up.
I mean, again, like, you don't need to see it it's good if you see it in the context of the series, but you don't need to. You can watch this unfold before you and just marvel at first of all, when you got to think of just the again, I want to make sure I use the right radio friendly word, the guts that it took from Lynch and Frost to put this episode on TV. You've only got 18 episodes of something that people have been clamoring for. And by the way, like, some people are starting to say that there's a little bit of a too slow storytelling in terms of the nostalgic aspect. So you're already getting some people that are getting kind of impatient with the way the story is developing. But here in the middle of this, you're going to throw this episode in where it's going to take a complete left turn. There's going to be very little talking. You're going to walk away wondering, like, exactly what did I just watch? I mean, that was a pretty gutsy move to install that into something that people were already counting down how many episodes were left.
Yeah, and, it begins with just an assault on your ears and eyes with the Nine Inch Nails She's Gone performance. And they perform the entire song, and there's all this strobe lights, and it probably is happening at maybe 7 minutes into the hour, which is how every episode ends, with a band performing at the Roadhouse. And now you're 7 minutes into it, and you have to listen to this whole song, and it is so loud and obnoxious in all the greatest ways. I'm not putting the song down, but, you know, it's an assault on you. And then you just go to this black and white time. I mean, it's only David Lynch could do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's, again, I can't recommend it enough to anybody who has never seen it. Maybe you just watched the first 2 seasons and you didn't watch The Return because you didn't have Showtime. I mean, seek this out. Even if you don't, again, I would never advocate people not watching the entire episode, but there are clips of it on YouTube, official clips that were put up on YouTube. Just watch those and you'll get a sense of what we're talking about and then want to check out the whole thing.
Well, and you could make the argument, which I've never thought about until right now, that it might be interesting for someone who wanted to watch Twin Peaks to start there. I mean, because in a way it is the beginning of Twin Peaks. I mean, that would be if you watched it that way, it would be a completely different experience for someone who started with Part 8 and then watched the series.
Yeah, there could be like a master recut like they did with The Godfather, you know, where they decide to tell it in chronological order. That might be pretty interesting. And, you know, we don't want to give David Lynch too many ideas that would keep him away from creating more of it, but that's might be a path worth taking. But that, as I mentioned, that episode also kind of sets up the dichotomy, and I don't even know if I necessarily want to call it the good versus evil, because there's so many shades within each of those in the world of Twin Peaks.
Yeah, I mean, it's the White Lodge versus the Black Lodge, if you boil it down to its simplest things. But I think so much of what Twin Peaks is about is setting up this idea of goodness. You know, Laura Palmer is the homecoming queen. She does Meals on Wheels. She tutored Johnny Horn. She taught Josie Packard how to speak English. And you're like, who is this girl? She must be the saint of the world. But then you find out she's on drugs. She's promiscuous, but then you find out none of those are her choices, and she's just a child. And so how do you peg Laura Palmer? You can't. And that's just one thing. She's not good or bad. She's just a girl.
Right. And you see a lot of the kind of the split down the middle of how the story is being told, that there's the fun and there's the wacky and there's let's talk about how good the coffee is and how good the cherry pie is and all that. And let's, in a lot of cases, let's fall in love. There's a lot of love stories happening in the world of Twin Peaks. But then there's this undercurrent. You have this undercurrent of Killer Bob. You have this undercurrent of these legends and the Black Lodge versus the White Lodge and all of that. And the fact that it can all exist at once and no part of the story is ever really underserved.
No, and I said, like, for me, Laura Palmer's my favorite part of the show. A question that I often ask, like, a new person that I'm going to talk with is, like, what path do you think leads Twin Peaks? Is it Agent Cooper or is it Laura Palmer? And for me, it's Laura Palmer. That's the path I want to go down. I'm interested in her because I think her story is one that has never been told before. It's more interesting to me. But, I mean, there's a lot of people who, to them, it's Agent Cooper takes the path. What about you? If you had to say who's the leader of Twin Peaks that takes you down the path, which side would you be on, Cooper or Laura?
I think I'm a Coop guy, mainly because I like to come in from the investigative standpoint rather than the being immersed within it. I think it's easier to understand it if you're coming in as an outside observer. But then, also you can become a little bit detached from it. And I think we see some of that detachment, with some of the other characters that come and are involved in this. But with Coop, he's sucked in right away. Like he becomes part of the fabric of Twin Peaks almost immediately.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm actually working on an essay for issue 13 that we're doing a whole thing on the pilot because it's the 30th anniversary. And so I decided, hey, I'm going to watch the pilot for the first time since season 3 ended. And I just took it. I'm like, okay, let's cover this now. And watching it again, of course, like you say, you go down the path of Cooper, and he's so funny, and he's talking about the trees and the bunnies and all this stuff. But I'm like, look what happens to Cooper because he comes here. Like, can you think it is all fun and games because he's going to sacrifice 25 years of his life and possibly more because we don't even know what year it is, when we get there. And it becomes a very different thing. Have you been able to see the pilot again since you've seen season 3?
No, I don't think that I have.
It plays differently, which is fascinating. Talking about the X-Files, you can go back and watch the pilot and it's the same pilot. It hasn't changed because they reboot it. But Twin Peaks, you got to look at it in a different way. And I really enjoyed breaking it down in that way.
I think that there's always going to be the characters that people will resonate or connect to. And it doesn't have to be that, it can't be anything more than just you like to have a weird, strange visit with these people. Or anytime that they're on the screen, your attention is drawn in an extra way. And I feel that way, and I'm not just sucking up to David Lynch. I feel that way about Gordon Cole. Every time I see him, I'm fascinated because I know that there's things that he does that he knows that he's not telling us or that he's not telling anybody else. I love the way that, the way that he treats the people that work under him. As much as he's trying to be the boss, he also cares about them as people. I tried last night with Christabel to get some answers. Still don't understand the whole thing with the hearing aid, but I love it. To me, it's just like Lynch had to say, if I'm going to find a way to put myself into this story, I have to be some of the best and the weirdest of it all at the same time.
Yeah, Gordon Cole is definitely one of my favorite characters. Gordon and Albert, and I loved them so much in the original series. And Gordon is basically played for comic relief in the first 2 series. It's really Firewalk with Me that Gordon Cole sort of really gets meshed into the mythology. And then in season 3, he's the keeper of that. I mean, he's the one that's going to know what happens in the original timeline or whatever happens when Cooper starts playing with the timeline. So Gordon Cole is a phenomenal character.
The character that I think I was most disappointed with, at least at first, was when we finally met Diane.
And that's interesting. What disappointed you?
I just thought that, and I understand kind of, what she went through, but at the same time I was kind of like, oh, this isn't like, you would expect that Diane would be this supportive character and, wouldn't be so angry and everything. And then of course you find out like kind of the whole true story about it. But I almost want to say like, thank God that the return was on Showtime and that she could say all those words that she said, because there's like a master cut video out there of all the time she told them to F off.
Right.
And it's just genius. It's probably my favorite Laura Dern thing ever.
Well, my theory of season 3 is that it doesn't exist. So that isn't Diane to me. So the real Diane could very well be the Diane that you're talking about. The Diane that we see, I believe that Cooper is still sitting in the chair, and what we watch in season 3 is he is stuck in the Red Room, and he is building himself back up to return to humanity. And by doing so, he is bringing together his whole life and all the things that life entails. And we really don't see him to the very, very end of the series when he comes out and goes to that hotel. And that Diane is not as vulgar as the Diane that happens through the majority of the series. But I think all of that doesn't exist. So how about that?
Yeah, you just blew my mind completely.
I know. That's great talk for late night radio, isn't it? But I really believe it. And I did almost from the get-go. From the first episode of season 3, there's clues to me that point out that this isn't real. This is just in Agent Cooper's mind.
Well, now I have to go back and rewatch it all from that perspective, and I will, because first of all, it's just amazing. It's not even television making; it's filmmaking. I know that it was on Showtime, but it's filmmaking, and I want to go back and kind of look at it through that perspective. We are going to take a break. When we come back on the other side, we can dive even more into that, into some of the aspects of Twin Peaks. But I do want to throw out tonight's trivia question so that people can win some coffee and some cherry pie. The question is, Mark Frost earlier said that he and David Lynch met when working on a film project that never materialized about what famous actress. So be the first person in the wormhole with that answer. You will win some cherry pie and some Dan Fine coffee from our friends at Deadly Grounds. We're going to take a break now, so get those answers into the wormhole, and we'll be back with more Midnight in the Desert in just a moment. And welcome back into Midnight in the Desert. It is Twin Peaks week. We'll get right back into the discussion with Scott Ryan about how Twin Peaks shaped pop culture. But we did throw out the trivia question, and I'm still looking for the right answer to come into the wormhole. The question was, and Tracy took a guess or put in some information that's actually the second script that Mark Frost and David Lynch worked on together. This is the first script that they worked on together. The project that they met on, as Mark told us earlier, it was going to center on one famous actress. And who was that actress that was supposed to be about? Now, don't give the answer, Scott, but do you know the answer?
Of course. Yes, I do.
Okay, so we'll have to hook you up with some damn fine Deadly Grounds coffee. But the wormhole is open for anybody that wants to put in the answer, and the first person with the correct answer will win cherry pie and some Deadly Grounds coffee. Thank you to them for supplying that for us. And a little bit later on, too, we'll give away some of I think when you can talk to somebody who has been passionate about this show for as long as Scott has been, who has been with it since the very beginning and all of that, how can you not want to win a copy of the Blue Rose magazine? It has to be the third best pen to write anything Twin Peaks behind David Lynch and Mark Frost.
Thank you. I have a great team. It's not just me. John Thorne is a writer, Courtney Stallings, Matt Marone works for ESPN. He writes about baseball for a living, but he's so passionate about Twin Peaks, he wants to write for us. Many others. I mean, I've been very lucky to put together a team that we've done 13 issues and covered so much and interviewed. And Showtime helps us. Sabrina Sutherland, who's the executive producer and David Lynch's right-hand woman, she's written for us. So we've been very, very blessed.
Well, and you've also had the opportunity with the podcast to talk to a lot of people around Twin Peaks and have some great experiences around Twin Peaks as well.
Yeah, I go to the UK Twin Peaks Fest every year. So the last 3 years we've gone to London, and I've pretty much met everyone except Angelo Badalamenti. That's my white whale. And I love the music so much. It's actually my favorite part of all of Twin Peaks. I mean, I love the music. So Angelo is my dream interview. So if he's out there listening, he's my dream to talk to.
He may very well be. I mean, and there's very few examples where I can say that the music is just as important as the storytelling, as the acting. I mean, obviously, music plays a great part, but there's nothing else where you get the atmospheric feel immediately than from that theme.
Oh, yeah. And a lot of shows have great theme songs, but how many shows have, I don't know, 150 different themes? I mean, they released something called the Twin Peaks Archive a couple years ago, where they released the MP3 of every bit of the soundtrack. And I don't know, it's 200 tracks probably, and they're all different. It's not the same Laura Palmer thing over. I mean, what Angelo Badalamenti did for a television show is mind-boggling. There isn't another show that did that, especially in 1990. I mean, that's not how TV shows were scored. They basically had 3 tunes that they used over and over again, and Angelo just busted that wide open. It's incredible, and that soundtrack was hugely popular.
Well, I think part of that too, though, is Lynch's commitment to music and his love of music. The fact that he was the sound designer on the show, right? David Lynch himself.
Yeah, of course, on all his movies and everything. I mean, he gets his hands in all of it.
So when you've got, the guy that's spearheading the whole thing, understanding what an important role that it plays, it just naturally comes together. And even Keith just playing that little clip of it, going into break, the shivers are there, the feeling that you get, and it doesn't feel like you're about to sit down on the couch and watch an episode of Twin Peaks. It feels like you're about to go to Twin Peaks.
Well, and you can, the thing about Twin Peaks that's crazy is you can go to Snoqualmie, Washington. That's where they filmed the pilot, Fire Walk with Me, and then a lot of season 3. The series, they built sets, but the pilot and Fire Walk with Me are all filmed in that area. And you can go to the Double R Diner. You can go to the Great Northern. And I have many times, and it's incredible. It's really there.
I can only imagine that feeling. And you've also had the opportunity to visit the Palmer House.
Yeah, it was a great story. So we were in Snoqualmie, and we knew the Palmer House. It's kind of like about 50 minutes away from there, and I was like, let's just drive up. I just want a picture of it. And this was before season 3 had happened. So we drive up to the Palmer House, and all I want to do is take a picture of it. And the people who own the house, they're sitting on their front porch, and they're watering their lawn. And they're sitting outside watching. And I was like, now I got to get out of the car. And so I do, and I start walking up, and I think, how am I going to tell these people, hey, get off your front porch, turn the sprinkler off, and let me take a picture? And I kid you not, as I approach the front steps, they are listening to the theme song of Twin Peaks. It's blasting out of the house. And I think, well, this is going to be easier than I thought. And I looked up, and they just said, we know why you're here. And they said, do you want a picture? And I said, I really do. Do you mind turning the sprinkler off? And they said, sure, but do you want to come into the house and see it? And I'm like, what? And they let me in. Me and my wife went in. We took pictures. I posed in different scenes. I was there for like 3 hours, and Mary Reber has become my friend because of this. And 6 weeks later, she's cast in season 3 as the owner of the Palmer House. And when you see that house in part 18 and she opens the door, she really does own the Palmer House. And it's just incredible to me that's my friend now.
It is. It's amazing. And it shows that there's, again, here you have somebody who's kind of on the fringes of this, who, I guess became involved in the world of it, but, just showing the appreciation and the understanding, the fact that there is this bigger connection for all things Twin Peaks, and saying, okay, I'm in on it. I'm totally in.
Well, and, you see the fan. I mean, they have the fan. It's really the fan, and you can stand under it. And I don't know if I don't know, we keep going back to the X-Files because it's on my brain, but you can't really go to Mulder's office. Like, that's a set. It's not really there. You can't go to some building and knock on the FBI and go down to the basement and find the poster. But you can really see this stuff. And I don't know, as someone who, that happened to me in 2015, so it had really been about 25 years that I'd been thinking about it. To get to walk into that, was amazing. And for someone to open their home to a stranger, and we ended up doing a spread on the house in one of the issues, and it just means a lot to me. The Palmer house just feels like Twin Peaks to me.
Did she think it was weird when you asked if you could bring a white horse into the living room?
Well, she had the white horse there, and I figured, what is it going to matter? You know, I mean, so I get a picture with it. I mean, and she actually has decorated the house to look the same, really. So she actually has a picture of Laura Palmer on and an old time telephone. And so it's the Palmer house, man. It's incredible.
No, I mean, there's got to be, you know, there's a difference between watching and experiencing, and that's gotta, if you didn't already feel like you'd crossed that threshold, that's got to be the moment when you do.
Yeah, and what happened is basically David Lynch showed up to look at the house for scouting for season 3. And he just kept looking at Mary, and then eventually he said, "Would you mind being in a scene in season 3?" And then she got cast to play the part of Alice Tremont. I mean, that's like a Hollywood dream story right there.
Now, we've touched upon some of the shows that Twin Peaks has inspired, and some of the writers that it has inspired over the years. And it, you know, one of the things that when we said we were going to be doing Twin Peaks week, we got a message in the wormhole, and I will try. And by the way, speaking of which, congratulations to Tracy. She got the answer to the trivia question right. It was Marilyn Monroe that David Lynch and Mark Frost were working on a script about. But let me see if I can find the actual message so I can give proper credit. Well, I'll bring it up later. But somebody mentioned, hey, if you're going to, here it is right here, Eric. We need to have a Lost week. Somebody wanted to have an entire week of shows dedicated to Lost, the same way we're doing with Twin Peaks. And Damon Lindelof is a guy who was definitely inspired by the world of Twin Peaks.
Well, I'll tell you, there are emails in your life you never forget. And when the email popped up that said, you have a new subscriber, and it was Damon Lindelof. He subscribes to the Blue Rose magazine. I mean, isn't that crazy? He is a true Twin Peaks fan. I mean, he loves it. And he says very openly that Lost was highly influenced by Twin Peaks. And it was something that they wanted to steer towards and away from. I mean, Mark intimated about some of the struggles that season 2 had by not having a strong planned out story. And those were things that Damon wanted to not happen in Lost. And I think you can see those connections between Lost and Twin Peaks. And I don't know. I think Eric's right. You should have a Lost week. I mean, Lost is a heck of a show.
No, I mean, I'd be all for it. I mean, but part of the Lindelof legacy a little bit was, I feel like The Leftovers kind of lost some of its way during its run. And I think it responded back and it came back. But, you know, you can kind of see the struggle to create this world and tell this story and to kind of fall into some of those same pitfalls. But when the Watchmen series came out, and I watched every episode of that, and I remember thinking to myself as I'm watching it, this reminds me of Twin Peaks: The Return.
Sure, especially the black and white episode.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. I was like, it felt like a lot of that was an homage to that.
And they use My Prayer too, don't they? I'm pretty sure they used a song from season 3. It wasn't the same group. I think they had the Ink Spots sing My Prayer instead of is in Watchmen. And there was something else. I feel like there were 3 different things that really connected to it. But I think he did learn about losing his way in the leftovers for that short amount of time, because the Watchmen being 9 and out is a similar type thing too, which I think is a good idea for television. The shorter, the better.
Yeah, I mean, and we don't even know. Like, that could be all of Watchmen. I haven't heard anything about there being any more of it, and it was a question that was never answered during the run. That's kind of a little bit of Twin Peaks-ish as well, because you know, there's questions that need to be answered, and we don't know if we're going to get those answers.
Yeah, because I thought I had heard that he said there is not going to be a season 2.
He had said there was no plan. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they might at some point, because as we know, every show in the world, except Quantum Leap, is coming back. So someday, I'm sure that it will come back.
Listen, NBC, you don't have to necessarily have Scott Bakula be in every episode, but just have him, you know, be involved somehow. If you can bring back Punky Brewster, you can bring back Quantum Leap. That's a true story. It's coming back.
Yeah, that's hilarious. And it's I loved Quantum Leap. I mean, it's such a great idea for a series. So I can't believe it hasn't, and I can't believe I haven't thought about it coming back. So I'm glad you've made me be sad for another TV show.
Well, I mean, if I can go down that rabbit hole a little bit, what will happen with that is, you know, we saw Don Bellisario saying, you know, we're never going to have. We'll have these little kisses with history, which is what they called it. But they said, we're never going to do the stunt casting episodes of, you know, having, you know, Sam leap into Elvis Presley, and then they're up against whether or not they're going to get renewed for a season 6, and they pull out all the stops. And next thing you know, Sam's leaping into Elvis Presley. He's trying to save Marilyn Monroe. He's, you know, in one episode there's aliens, in one episode there's Bigfoot. So there's all these different, you know, ways that they tried to try and keep that going. And satisfy the network in a way that they thought would get them more episodes, and it was all for nothing. But it just as, again, total side note. But if you watch I think it's the season 3 premiere where Sam leaps into Lee Harvey Oswald, might have been 4. But if you watch that, I mean, that's another example of just great television storytelling in a way that kind of blows your mind at the end of it, because in the end, you know, Sam's upset that he couldn't save John F. Kennedy, but in the end, it turns out he was there to save Jackie. So,
right.
And we
I
were living in the
that
timeline that he had saved. So, just a total side note again. I feel like I'm hijacking the conversation here, but
no. I mean, that is a great episode, and when I also love the Evil Leaper, which was there to. I mean, that to me is a mythology that really could have been more. I mean, so I'm with you on that totally. And you know, if we're gonna mention the X-Files for the last time, I really wanted to do a book on Darren Morgan, because you mentioned the werewolf episodes, and I still am not giving up the idea. I've just struggled to get the interviews that I need to do it, because he's sort of not really big into doing interviews, and obviously David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson are hard to get. But I want to do a book about the 9 scripts that Darren Morgan wrote for the X-Files and Millennium, because to me those episodes are phenomenal.
And the other part of that too is, you know, just as Twin Peaks pushed boundaries, the X-Files pushed them boundaries. People forget that because now it seems tame in a lot of the episodes that they did, but they pushed a lot of buttons to the point where I think it was Home that was banned and couldn't be shown on television.
Well, you can't hear the Johnny Mathis Wonderful, Wonderful and not be scared to death. I mean, who could make Johnny Mathis scary? I mean, that's crazy. But I hear that song, I'm lifting my feet above a bed.
Right. Yeah, I am not looking under the bed if I hear that. But that's the great part about television, is that it can have these, you know, if the storytelling is done right and if everything comes together, it can have that lasting effect. And, you know, we saw that with Twin Peaks. You mentioned in some of the show notes that when they actually reveal who killed Laura Palmer, and spoiler alert for a 30-year-old show, we're going to give stuff away here. But I couldn't believe, having not seen that live or not remembering seeing that live when it happened and seeing it later, I couldn't believe that. How did they get away with putting this on ABC at that time?
Well, I mean, I'm glad as a sixth grader you didn't see it, because I remember watching that for the first time, and I don't believe that anything like that has been on TV, certainly not before, but I honestly don't think anything that scary and violent and disturbing has aired on television since. I would really be shocked. Now, obviously, I'm not talking about cable, but we're talking about ABC, who at that time was owned by an extremely conservative network. And they didn't like Twin Peaks. They liked the numbers, but they were not happy with that show. That wasn't something that they wanted. Mark kind of mentioned in his interview with you how they were looking for Peyton Place. They were looking for Dallas, another soap opera, and that's not what they got. And it is one of the scariest, most violent. But you don't see blood, really. There's nothing that you can censor, because it's not about what you consider to be, I don't know, that classic violent scene. It's much worse than that. And Cheryl Lee plays the actress in that murder scene. And she had to film it 3 times. Mark mentioned that they... To trick the crew and everyone, they filmed it 3 different times. So for one day, she was beaten and murdered for 18 straight hours. I mean, it's incredible what she went through to film that, and knowing that only one of them's airing.
And it, like you said, it wasn't so much the fact that it's a brutality thing. It's what it represents. It's what it means, and sure, yes, there's possession involved in it, but at the very surface of, and I guess maybe not dancing around. Here's her father. Right. Out of all the people that she should be able to trust, and it's that situation, and it's the fact that this evil being could exploit that most trusted of relationships. It made it so disturbing.
Well, and this is the thing about Twin Peaks. When you boil it down, it's about the most horrifying thing that can happen. And it's disturbing. And I have been, as I said, lucky enough to sort of get to know Cheryl Lee. We've been at events together, and I've been selling the magazine, and she's been next to me meeting fans. And what she has to put up with is the wrong word. What she has to go through in meeting fans is different than everyone else. Because, if you're going to meet Agent Cooper, you're going to say, oh, damn fine coffee or something. But there are girls who come up to her and start crying immediately. And she she takes them to the side and has to have a conversation with them, because she doesn't know what she's going to get, because there are victims who, and when I interviewed Cheryl, she said, this happens to women every day. I just played a part, but this violence and abuse happens. And I know we're bringing the show down talking about it, but it is something that happens. And when I interviewed her in the magazine at her request, I publish helplines for people who are dealing with abuse and need to talk to someone, because it is a thing that she carries to this day. I mentioned Courtney Stallings, who writes for the Blue Rose. She's actually writing a book called Laura's Ghost that is about this very topic that Cheryl Lee is involved with, and we're putting it out in August. And I've been reading some of it, and it's horrifying. I mean, and this is just, again, from this TV show.
Yeah, it's something that I never would have thought about, that would be kind of the lasting legacy for that character for some people is, both I mean, in some cases, maybe a painful reminder for people, but also as kind of a kindred spirit for others.
Well, yeah, and if you take Fire Walk with Me, which is my favorite part of all of Twin Peaks, I love Fire Walk with Me. It is Laura's battling of that and succeeding with it. She doesn't give herself up. She fights to the end and in my opinion wins because she doesn't give herself over to Killer Bob. She says no, and then she pays a different price, but in the end she gets an angel and moves on from that. And it's really, if you're depressed and going through a rough time, in a way, Fire Walk with Me is a movie to watch. It's helped me through things. And I mean, now I've just brought the show to a complete stop with this serious topic. But honestly, that's what Twin Peaks is about.
And this just goes to show that for anybody that thinks that we are spending a week talking about something that is just a television show, this is proof positive right here that it is something beyond that. It is something more. It is some of the greatest art storytelling that has happened in the last 30 years. So we are going to take a break. We'll come back with our final segment with Scott, and we're going to be talking some more about Twin Peaks, about its lasting impact on pop culture, and also we can give away the Blue Rose magazine. What I'll do is maybe during the break, Scott, I'll have you think of a trivia question.
Ooh.
And then we can put that out to the audience and they can try to answer that in the wormhole. So I'll give you a couple of minutes notice there to come up with something pretty good.
All right.
Because we've got some true fans that are out there listening tonight, and we know that they know their stuff. And, of course, we'll also be giving away some of the Cherry Pie and Deadly Grounds coffee on social media as well. Make sure that you like the Midnight in the Desert Facebook page, that you follow Midnight in the Desert on Twitter, and we will be giving away some of that way as well. We're going to take a break, and then we'll come back with our last segment tonight, Twin Peaks Week, here on Midnight in the Desert. Welcome back to Midnight in the Desert, Twin Peaks Week. And listening to that promo talking about how you can become a time traveler at midnightinthedesert.com and have access to all the archives, it kind of just hit me and settled in my brain. I got to interview Mark Frost tonight. And now it's amazing. And kudos to Michelle for helping put together a fantastic week here. We knew that we wanted to do this. We didn't know how the audience would respond. And I have to say, I am pleasantly surprised with how much our audience loves Twin Peaks. And our guest right now, Scott Ryan, is somebody who definitely loves Twin Peaks. And during the break, I had said that I was going to give you the opportunity to ask a trivia question to somebody to win a copy of the Blue Rose magazine. But before we give them the question, let's talk about the magazine, because you started this at a time when starting a magazine was kind of a risky venture.
Yeah, it wasn't probably the best idea I ever had, but I wanted one, and that's really what did it. I was lucky enough to meet Catherine Coulson, who was the Log Lady. She played the Log Lady in Twin Peaks. And we had a great interaction. She was so kind to me, and she was the first Twin Peaks person I met in real life. And 6 weeks later, she died. And at that time, I was sitting in a cubicle at a major corporation, a nationwide corporation, sitting in a cubicle answering a phone. And I thought, I don't want to do this. Like, I want to write. And there was something about her passing that said, what's going to happen? I'm going to go too. And I started the magazine, and that led me to getting to do a book. And, now we're doing this Conversations with Mark Frost with David Bushman, and we've got this Laura's Ghost book coming. We did the Women of Lynch book. Each thing has led, and now I'm running this company. And that's crazy, but it was my passion for all these years, but I never took the leap to really like writing about it and doing it. And now we have 13 issues. It ships all around the world. People can check it out at bluerosemag.com. and we've interviewed so many people, and it's just amazing. I'm so thankful to all our subscribers and everyone who's helped us get to this place.
It must have been especially hard when the episode aired in The Return. That's basically the goodbye to Margaret and the goodbye to Catherine Coulson.
Well, it honestly was the first time we saw her that really got me in, and that's in the first episode. And you see her because she ended up passing away 4 days after she filmed that scene, and she looks so ill. And she was wearing a hat when I met her. And I didn't know she had cancer. And she signed stuff for me and took pictures. And here she's dying. And, that kindness was crazy. And they're making a documentary about her called I Know Catherine. It's being directed by Richard Green, who was the magician in Mulholland Drive, if you're a David Lynch fan. And he's making this documentary about it, and I've been lucky enough to be interviewed for it and tell that story because it mattered so much to me and really changed. The Log Lady means the world to me.
And I think that a lot of people come away feeling that she is the conscience of Twin Peaks.
Yeah,
the character is the conscience of the town, and she's the conscience of the series.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I mean, and her role in season 3 is so moving as an actress to have those lines, knowing that she didn't have much time left. So, again, another just emotional, crazy thing where art and life blend together. And so but again, what is it about getting late that it's getting deep here, man? You've got me all worked up. But
that's what we do here.
I know. I'm having a paranormal experience myself here. But in the Blue Rose, the issue that we're giving away is called the Women of Lynch issue, where we had all female writers. They wrote 40 essays about 40 Lynch characters, and the Log Lady is certainly one of those. We have interviews with Sheryl Lee and Sabrina Sutherland and Piper Laurie. Yeah, Piper Laurie.
Wow.
That's a get.
Absolutely.
And Charlotte Stewart, who is the ultimate woman of Lynch because she was in Eraserhead and she has the longest span of working with David Lynch. So it's a great issue, one we're really proud of. It has a beautiful cover, and I think Twin Peaks fans would like it. So I'm going to ask 2 questions, okay? Because one's kind of hard, and I'd like to give away a couple issues, so I don't want to stump everyone. So I'm going to ask the first harder question, because I thought of this when you were talking about your trivia question, which we can give the answer now, right? Because you already said what their script was on. Right. So it was Marilyn Monroe. My question is, what Twin Peaks character is based on Marilyn Monroe?
Oh, good one.
So that's the hard question. So should we let that germinate for a little bit, and then I'll ask the easy one so we can give like a couple copies away?
Yeah.
Or you want me to give the easy one right now? Should we see if anyone, so people are really listening live and they send it in? We got time, right?
Yep. They send it in via the wormhole at midnightinthedesert.com if they have a guess that they want to take or they feel they know the answer.
Let's see what happens. And then I'll give an easy one, and we'll give, like 5 or 10 away or something.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. And I do want to talk a little bit, though, and as people are putting in their guesses about David Lynch and the way that people perceive the women in his stories. I think, kind of the prototypical thing that people will point to is, the Monica Bellucci fantasy sequence.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see what people see when they think that Lynch might be, misogynistic in some ways. I feel like women are so revered especially in Twin Peaks.
Yeah. And that was the genesis of this issue that we're giving away tonight. And then that spun off the book called The Women of Lynch, where we had 13 female writers, again, letting females make the decision on whether Lynch is misogynistic or not. Because there's a very famous quote from Roger Ebert when Blue Velvet came out, where he said, this is horrible, and what he's doing to Isabella Rossellini, which takes away Isabella Rossellini's ability to say, hey, I'm playing a character, and this is a complex woman in Blue Velvet. And Laura Palmer is definitely a complex person. You can't just pigeonhole her as either the homecoming queen or a promiscuous person. There's so much more going on than that. And, you throw something at Sheryl Lee, and she's really going to have something to say to you about how complex. And you think of the women in Mulholland Drive, very, very complex women. So I was pleased that we gave that mic over to women writers and said, you tell us what you see and we'll print it. And nobody came back with that he was misogynistic.
Yeah, I find that people, especially these days, and I don't want to get into a whole thing about where the entertainment industry has gone, but people like to look and find things that aren't there. They love to find something to be upset about, some controversy to create when they may not be there. Nobody wants to accept the fact that sometimes the story is served by certain treatment of certain characters or characterizations of certain characters that you need to kind of have some of that. So I guess my one complaint about the way, especially in the world of Twin Peaks, that female characters are treated is I never really understood everything that happened with Audrey Horne.
Well, that gets complex because there is a lot of behind the scenes reasons for the Audrey Horne story. That might be true, might not. I'm not going to shoot my mouth off live on the radio, but I don't know. It is an interesting complaint, but their hands might have been tied a little bit on that.
Okay, so it might have been more just, I guess we could say, her commitment level to the project. Maybe, is that fair?
I don't know. I mean, I've heard that there's a lot of people, including Sherilyn Fenn, that talks about her feelings on the script. So I don't know. It's not for me to say, but don't blame them on that. They might have just dealt with what they could have.
Okay, I'll take that as a fair. And one of the, of course, the thing that I'm squeezing everybody on, last night with Krista Bell, tonight with Mark Frost, and I will ask James Marshall and I will ask Michael Horse about it later on in the week. And that's, if there's any rumblings of there being future installments of Twin Peaks. But as Mark Frost was saying, it's a world that will live on forever, even if they don't create more of it. I have to imagine it's probably a pretty rich world when it comes to fan fiction and the way that, fans will pick up the mantle for certain creative properties and kind of carry the storytelling. Is there a lot of that in the world of Twin Peaks?
There is. I'm not a part of it because I don't want to get sued. Right. We have a great relationship with CBS/Showtime. They've been great to me from the very beginning. And I think part of it is I really watch their trademark and their copyright. So when you take a character and you start creating it, that's when the lawyers come around. So I stay far away from that. We cover it from almost an educational point as things to study. I'm probably the worst person to ask about season 4 because I'll just flat out tell you there's never going to be one. I think we saw the end of Twin Peaks in September 2017. I don't think there'll be more.
But you've laid the best groundwork of anybody for a season 4.
Yeah, because I think there should be, but I don't think there will be. I think that was it. I think that was Mark and David saying goodbye to it. I mean, I was wrong. I also said there wouldn't be a season 3 of it, you know. So what do I know? But I just don't think there's going to be any more Twin Peaks. I mean, the log lady isn't with us. Albert is no longer with us. Don Davis, you know, so many of the cast has moved on. I just don't know. I don't see how it could really happen. And of course, Peggy Lipton is not with us anymore. I mean, a lot of the cast they're getting older, including Lynch. I mean that was amazing that he could direct 18 hours of a TV show. Right.
And he played significant time in it as well.
Yeah, it's crazy. So did anyone answer our hard question?
I haven't seen anything come into the wormhole yet to answer it. So, maybe we should ask the easy one.
Yeah,
but we will.
I'll ask the easy one, which is name any other project besides Twin Peaks that Laura Dern was in. So she's, you know, an ultimate woman of Lynch. So name another project that Laura Dern and David Lynch were in together.
That one is definitely an easy one.
That's an easy one.
And even if people don't grab it tonight in the wormhole, of course, anybody that listens on the archive will have the opportunity to win too. So if you still haven't, if you're listening to this later on after the fact, don't be afraid to put your answer in the wormhole, because you might still be one of the winners of one of the copies of the Blue Rose magazine.
And if they answer the harder question, I will throw in more than, just more than issue 7. So I'll give a couple. So you're going to get a little bit more for that.
Oh, see, there you go, people. That's a perfect reason to dive into that. Speaking about Laura Dern and working with Lynch, and we talked a little bit about this with Christabel last night. He does seem to be somebody who works with, he finds people that he likes to work with and continues to work and create with those people.
Yeah, I mean, they are so loyal to them. It's crazy. And Ray Wise is someone that you mentioned about having a great performance, and he said only David Lynch can bring that out of me. That's what Sheryl Lee says. That's what Dana Ashbrook says. I mean, you'll find out, talking to James and Michael, who are both great guys, and I can't wait to hear that. There is something about David Lynch and the way he treats actors that he brings out performances that other people just can't do. It's incredible.
I mean, you look at the actors and the performances that you get in Twin Peaks, and you say a lot of those people should have gone on to big stardom, and not a lot of them did. A lot of them, of course, been very active and working the entire time, but they didn't. It wasn't a breakthrough for them, and it certainly wasn't that Twin Peaks pigeonholed them. I think it's just that it was that magic of working with Lynch that kind of elevated them to some ethereal level.
Well, and to me, Sheryl Lee is a great example of that. I mean, her performance in Fire Walk with Me is the single greatest female performance ever captured on film, and anyone can fight me on that if you want. It's just incredible what she goes through, and I'm a huge fan of hers and everything. But yeah, she never really made that leap like someone like Laura Dern did, and it is weird. I don't know why it happens. What's your favorite Lynch film outside of Twin Peaks? Do you have one, or are you just like a Twin Peaks fan?
Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily have a favorite, because everything is weird in my life.
Right.
And everything kind of fits in, and I'm sure you're the same way. Everything kind of fits into the moment. Mm-hmm. And I remember when Lost Highway came out, and I didn't see it in the theater, but I don't even know if I have full recollection of it. But I remember standing in the video store and trying to decide, because I was going to be going back to my girlfriend's house, and her parents were going to be like there watching a movie with us.
Yeah, that wouldn't have been a good one.
Do I bring home a Lynch movie? Do I bring home a Lynch movie? And then I said no, definitely not. Because, and I think what did I end up renting? I don't know, but there was another night where I made the mistake of bringing home Cronenberg's Crash, and that did not go well either.
No, the movies that's such a fascinating thing. Because like I mentioned watching, Twin Peaks with my girlfriend's family, and that has to be gone from society. Now everyone's watching their own Netflix on their own device, and probably that doesn't even happen anymore.
It's probably so much better for dating now because they don't know how weird you are. You can go into the other room and watch what you want. But that was a very big mistake that I made, was bringing home. And these people are like, oh, we like to have sex with people that have stumps. And I was like, well, this was a good relationship, but I guess I'm not allowed to come over here anymore.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That was then. And Lost Highway wouldn't have helped at all. You would have definitely been asked to leave.
But I mean, people forget too. Like I was talking with Mark Frost about, that series Over the Air. I mean, you wouldn't say to somebody, hey, David Lynch made a comedy, and they're like, what? But you don't understand like the different elements that he brings into a lot of these. All the different movies can be looked at under a lot of different lenses.
Yeah, and when I was pushing Mark Frost about getting On the Air released on Blu-ray. I mean, it's time for that show to have a second coming. There's only 6 episodes, and only 2 of them aired in America. So it's a show that's been hidden away long enough. It's time for some release.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of Lynch that kind of people grew up with. And maybe they don't remember it. I mean, how many people watch Dune and then you tell them, well, that's a David Lynch movie.
Right.
And then what? Or Elephant Man, even as much as it has its weird moments, it's a David Lynch movie. That was something that when I was a kid, it was on every night on HBO.
Yeah, that's where I saw it. I mean, Elephant Man was the first Lynch thing I ever saw. And I mean, it really creeped me out. It's certainly not creepy in a Lynchian way, but he still has that there's no shield between emotion and what you're watching. That's the difference between a Lynch film and other things, where he's going to take it one step farther, where you just can't. There's no protection.
All right, so we do have some guesses. So Mark in the wormhole, because I'm just going to give people that haven't won yet a chance to win.
Sure.
Mark in the wormhole says Laura is Marilyn, and that Laura Dern was in Wild at Heart.
Well, that's true. So he does win one for that way, but that is not who is the character based on Marilyn Monroe. It's not Laura Palmer.
Yep. And so, Mark, shoot me an email, tim@midnightinthedesert.com, and we'll get all your information over. But yeah, no, that question is still out there for somebody to answer. And certainly I don't think it's that hard of a question though, really. I mean, I know you said that it's hard, but I think
I don't think you could Google it. That was the thing, because I was trying to think of something that you couldn't Google, because, I mean, trivia questions, they're hard now because everything in the world is on Google. So I was trying to think of something that, but if you're a Blue Rose subscriber, you'd know, because we did have an article about it. So.
Oh, see, there you go.
But then they already have the issue, so they don't care.
Well, maybe they just want another one. I mean, I was definitely aware of that, how easy it is to Google some of this stuff. So that's why when I was trying to pull these trivia questions this week, I said, you know what? Michelle found a great trivia site for Twin Peaks fans. I said, you know what? We're going to pull it out of the conversation. And so that way there, you have to be listening to the show to be able to win. And also I've, tried to find information that maybe they can't find anywhere. So, like last night, I just asked Christabel her favorite Elvis song as a way to make sure that I got something in there that they couldn't Google. So if you think, folks, that you're going to win just by waiting for the question and then searching for it, we're making it harder than that.
Christabel is so incredibly beautiful that when I met her, I don't really get nervous about meeting people, because I've interviewed a lot of people by now. And it wasn't about being nervous, but she took my breath away. I mean, she's otherworldly. She's so beautiful and so kind. So I'm sorry you had her on the radio, that you couldn't see her, but she is just incredible in person.
No, believe me, I have a total and complete crush on her, and I am not afraid to admit that. Just and such a sweet, warm person, and messaging today, and like really just loves the opportunity to talk to the fans. So and of course she'll be there at the Twin Peaks 30 official fan fest at Graceland. And is this kind of a as much as it is for the fans to get to the chance to meet the actors involved and the people involved in the production of the show, I'm sure there's a big level too of fans who have never met each other in real life getting the chance to finally get together.
Well, and I've been to a lot of these things, and like I said, I'm working with the Graceland people on doing something at this one. And the thing that I always tell them is, sure, we love the celebrities, but the true joy is just talking to a Twin Peaks person you never talked to in your life and hearing their theory that you think is stupid, and then you tell them why it's stupid, and they tell you why your theory's stupid, and then you're best friends, and the next thing you know, you're traveling the world with them. I mean, it's incredible. I have so many great friends that I've met through this show, tons of them. And it's just given me so much, and I know that sounds crazy. The story that I like to tell about it'd be like going to a diner, a local diner, and going up to someone and say, "Hey, did you ever see an episode of Everybody Loves Raymond?" And they'd say, "Yeah." "Oh, good. Well, scoot over. I'm gonna have breakfast with you." You just wouldn't do that in real life. But Twin Peaks fans, we get together, we travel together, and they're some of my best friends in the world.
So if it's a Twin Peaks fan, when you're in the diner, you hear, out of earshot, somebody say, "Well, that's a damn fine cup of coffee." And then you turn your head around and you say, here we go.
And you say, every day, give yourself a present.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Scott, thank you so much for joining us and for talking with us about Twin Peaks, and also, for generously giving away the magazines. We'll make sure that we get all the winners' information over to you so that you can send that out to them.
Great, and everyone can check me out at BlueRoseMag.com. We've got a ton of Twin Peaks, really good product and content, and it helps because we're just a little old. We're a little small company. We're not Amazon. We're real tiny.
There you go. Yes, support new thriving media. That does it for tonight. Another great episode of Twin Peaks Week. We'll be back tomorrow night when we'll be talking about Twin Peaks again. We'll be talking with Reverend Gary Duncan about thought forms, tulpas, doppelgangers.